Hello and welcome to another edition of the Stench of Truth. I'm going to have some commentary on the Boston Marathon bombing. And at the end I'm going to have some commentary on the movie Oblivion. And I'll give you an opportunity to tune out because it will include spoilers. But before I get into a further analysis of the Boston Marathon bombing, I'd like to try to put some things in perspective. First of all, I'd like to reiterate the fact that it's important for us to remember that an event occurred. As to the ultimate responsibility and the ultimate facts surrounding it, we need to remember that people were injured, people were hurt, people were killed. And I know there are many different stories floating around the internet about this and the various conspiracies with it. You can find all kinds of video and picture analysis that seems to show, inconsistencies or wrongness or whatever, and there are various different theories that are being passed around about what ultimately happened and what were some of the driving factors behind it. Now, first and foremost, our prayers and our thoughts should be with the families of people who lost someone. 3 people died, and also have empathy and compassion for the people who are injured in this event. I think about the amount of sorrow that has been expressed in relation to the people who were sadly killed and injured in this terrible tragedy, and it makes me think how much better a world it would be if the people who can give out an outpouring of love and compassion and support to a community, to a city, like they do to Boston in relation to this event, and in recognition of the lives that were lost, that if we could harness that for the people who are also murdered by America Incorporated, and that is the official name that I'm going to give to the military-industrial wing of the administration of this supposed country, and that's how I will refer to it from now on, USA Incorporated. If we had as much compassion for the so-called collateral damage associated with drone strikes around the world, and that is people who are killed whenever someone who's supposedly an evil person is targeted for destruction, and they are killed in the subsequent blast from the drone or from whatever kind of death-dealing machine we decide to send in there, that everything would be much better in this world, because there would be a massive movement to end this indiscriminate death that rains down on people from USA Incorporated. So, I think that lives lost are qualitatively the same, because we're all human beings, and I think that qualitatively we're all equal in that regard. And when any life is lost, it's a terrible tragedy for the people who knew that person, and possibly for society as a whole, because we don't know what great things that person could have achieved in their life. So that's just a small commentary there. Now, in regards to the Boston bombing, there have been, as I noted, many different analyses conducted on photos and videos purporting to show many different things. Fakery, staged actions, supposedly people with blown off limbs that are actually actors who are amputees, any number of 100 different kinds of things have been brought out about this. And the thing that strikes me as interesting is that that ultimately this came back to the idea of Islam Islamic radicalism as being the impetus behind the bombing, and that these two individuals that we're being presented as the perpetrators of this from Chechnya, which initially did not really mean that much to me, but after further looking at it, it became clearer that what we're seeing is factional fighting. And the reality is that there is a certain meme that is very strong in this country that has been promoted by the far-right radical fringe, the neo-Confederates, the so-called libertarians that want to wreck and destroy the federal government in this country, and therefore they have this notion that has been deeply embedded within the system in this country. And there are many people who actually very vigorously defend that, of the ultimate evil of all is the government. And if you want to achieve anything, either politically or socially, whatever, the ultimate evil, the ultimate thing that is preventing that from happening, the ultimate oppressor is the government. Well, nothing can be further from the truth. And you need to realize that the government, quote unquote, is not a monolithic thing that is either oppressing, destroying, disrupting, whatever. What we have is we have the military-industrial complex portion of the government, which largely is security, domination, and destruction oriented. And a lot of that is coming home to roost for us in the factional fighting that we see being played out with the kinds of events like the Boston Marathon bombing. And this is pure conjecture on my part, based on tidbits of news and things that I have pieced together, which lead me to believe that this is the case. That what we saw with Benghazi, was a factional disruption designed to affect the outcome of the election last year. And because I believe that some of the forces that are operating within that faction were aligned with people who wanted to elect Romney, obviously that failed. But this faction is very strongly represented within the government, and I believe that this is another action by that faction of the government. So it's not the government, and it's never the government. There's always going to be nefarious, bad, evil, destructive actions that can be laid at the doorstep of USA Incorporated. But one has to remember that there are various branches, agencies, people within the confines of the government who are good people, who are doing a good job, who are trying to do the best they can with the resources that they have. There are programs to help the poor, there are programs to, there are like Social Security, Medicare, all of these things are government-run programs, and they do very well. They help people. They are very good things. But, of course, as I've been talking about forever now, there is an assault to remove that portion of the government that actually does help actual people in this country and more or less make the federal government into a very small force that the only thing it does is fling its power anywhere it goes, and that includes within our own supposed country here. And when I said in the previous video that the rampant increase in gun sales only serves to promote the idea of a police state, because there's always the idea that the police and the law enforcement agencies are always trying to stay a step ahead of the population because they're a reflection of the criminal element as well, and of potential civil unrest. And we need to realize that, of course, that the federal government of USA Inc. Does very well know that there's a possibility of very large-scale civil unrest in this country. And I think that part of the factional infighting is designed to kind of blunt the edge of any kind of organizing in the way of trying to come up with a civil unrest in this country, something that would support a revolutionary spirit, that would try to stop the more egregious actions of USA Incorporated, and to try and instead have the government be responsible to the people of the country, which is what they're supposed to do. And breaking this ideology that the government as a monolithic whole is the ultimate enemy, which, as I've been trying to tell you for a long time now, because the corporate and banking world, the finance, it's actually finance capital really is the core of this, okay, because it runs everything. It controls the stock markets, it controls the commodities markets, it controls corporations, it makes them rise and fall, it makes winners and losers. It's all about finance capital. This is largely based in Wall Street, and that's why I've been supporting various things that are trying to attack the very center, the very core of what is corrupting this country and what is leading to the kind of factional fighting that you're seeing with the Boston bombing. Because there are power brokers who are trying to use the forces of the abilities and resources available through the finance capital arena to either fund or defund things that benefit their particular factions. So when I hear someone say that the Boston bombing is a false flag, well, I guess technically it is, because it's being portrayed as something other than what it is. So I believe that the Boston bombing is an outgrowth, a continuation of the same kind of factional fighting that we had with Benghazi. Forces that wanted to remove Obama from president because they wanted to take a sterner, more militaristic, and more direct route to crippling this country than Obama. But Obama represents a softer form of fascism, a more gradual descent down into feudal serfdom, whereas the other side just wants to brutally get it over with already. And I've talked about this before. They were defeated. They did not get the result that they wanted last time, so they're going to continue to act. Now, Chechnya, as you remember, I did a video about the aggression with Georgia and Russia in the past, but Chechnya is another one that has a very tenuous connection with Russia here. And what we're seeing now come out is that Russia warned the United States about these two people, several times. They told the FBI about them as being possibly involved in something, and maybe we should keep an eye on them, and supposedly one of them was being followed by the FBI. And then you say to yourself, well, we have all this surveillance, we have all of this intrusiveness and the police state and everything else, and yet they fail to find these people and stop them before they actually engage in some kind of terrorist activity. So, at the very least, this should serve as an object lesson that massive surveillance and everything else does not protect us from so-called terrorist actions. And if you say to yourself that the FBI failed to do their job, or that someone failed to act on information that was available to them, I believe that this is a systemic problem, which is highlighted by the idea of there being factions within the government. And I think that people tend to hold on to their information or use it to be advantageous to the particular clique that they belong to. So if it did not further an agenda of somebody or some power group who happened to come by the information on the Tsarnaev brothers, then they decided to not do anything about it and let it play out. So there are factions of the government, I believe, that are involved in this, but that does not mean that the entire government is corrupt. It's the same thing that happened with 9/11. And there were immediate parallels between the Boston Marathon bombing and 9/11, because You immediately, after the bombing happened, you had the poison letters sent to Congress and the president. And this was a direct, reference back to the anthrax mailings back during the time of 9/11, okay, which was another piece of terrorism theater, if you will. And there were factions of USA Incorporated who either planned or allowed or facilitated, whatever word you want to use, the ultimate culmination of events of 9/11, which left thousands dead and, as they like to say, changed the course of this nation and maybe the world thereafter. And of course, the Boston bombing will have its own effect, however long-lasting it is, on the ultimate resolution of various things within this country. But you need to realize that the powers that be, whether they're in one faction or another, are always trying to cover their actions and to prevent you from seeing what they're really doing by throwing out distractions all the time. And remember, when they label the innocent civilians killed by drone strikes as collateral damage, or that they're deemed automatically enemy combatants because they happen to be in the proximity of someone who does something illegal, that would be like me walking down the street, minding my own business, someone's robbing a bank, I happen to pass in front of the bank, the police come blow up the whole place. I'm an enemy combatant because I was close to the bank that was being robbed. Do you see how utterly ridiculous that is? So they don't care. They don't care about people who are killed. They don't care about death. They don't care about injury. They don't care about people at all. These people, the only thing they care about is riding this machine as long as they can, getting as rich as they can, and they don't care how many people they trample underneath themselves. They don't care how many people die. They don't care how much blood is shed. The only thing they care about is raping this country, this people, the world, of all of its resources, all of its money, everything that they can possibly get before everything goes to hell. So that's my take on what happened in Boston. And I think that in addition to what's going on with this is that we have several other operations that are going on at the same time. There were undercover somebodies in that crowd. Now, whether it's Kraft International, whether it's other mercenaries belonging to various other private companies that provide security work, I think it's pretty clear that there were some people there, and some of them may have had nefarious intent, and some of them may have facilitated in what actually happened. Some of them may have been involved. Ultimately, I don't think we're going to have an answer to these questions, but what I think is that there was a lot of information put out, deliberately being obfuscatory, so that when people started to dig, and when the media inevitably screwed up like they did, CNN so famously did, reporting that suspects had been apprehended when in fact nothing was further from the truth. Other media, of course, equally culpable in the horrific handling of the information associated with this. It's obvious that there were other things that were going on here, that there were people at least watching what was happening during the course of this. And ultimately, I'd like to see all of these people brought to justice. But it appears to me that a lot of this was private contractor people, which may mean that there are corporate players involved in this as well that are outside the scope of the quote-unquote government. So you need to realize that there are private armies out there that are run and controlled by corporations. So the so-called libertarian notion that the state has a monopoly on force is the biggest farce that I've ever heard. Because we now have the outsourcing and privatization of force, you see. And all you have to do is look around the country and see privatized security forces being used in place of people who are employed by the government as police force, as law enforcement officers. This is gradually going to be outsourced, and there will be no accountability for police and police brutality and actions that are counter to what law enforcement are supposed to do. So no, there is no monopoly on the use of force by the state. That's just false. Many of these corporate forces use force and deliver death and injury all the time, and they have absolutely no accountability. It's much worse than what you have with the state's use of force in relation to law enforcement. But that's kind of a side issue. So yes, I think there were other things that were happening there that day. Ultimately, it looks to me as though these brothers were positioned to pick up bits and pieces of information that led them to engage in activities that they were probably being overseen by somebody else. There is probably some connection with the Saudi guy who was deported, which may indicate that there is, some Saudi activity in the background here. And of course, we can't have that coming to light because, we're in bed so deep with the Saudi Arabians because of the oil, because of all the other political shenanigans going on with the Middle East, that we can't possibly implicate Saudi Arabia in anything. And this was exactly true at 9/11 as well, when, most of the people supposedly labeled as terrorists in that activity were Saudi Arabian. But we can't really talk about that because we don't want to say anything bad about Saudi Arabia, even though they're one of the chief proponents of this type of terrorism activity by actually funding it and being behind a lot of it. But then you look at Chechnya and you see that this may be actions designed around Russia in some fashion. But knowing, as we do, that Russia supposedly told the FBI several times to keep an eye on these brothers, that what may have been intended to happen was not achieved, and that is somehow to goad some action out of Russia or goad some retaliatory action out of Chechnya towards Russia. So this ultimately may have been a power play in many different directions. So I want to caution everybody, okay? Because what I see developing out of Sandy Hook in particular, because here you have a case that has largely been completely sealed up, okay? We don't have anything other than what has been officially told to us by the officials in charge of the supposed investigation of what happened with Sandy Hook. We've seen no pictures. We've seen no video of Adam Lanza in the school. We've seen no photography of anything related to this case at all, except for, the videos of what happened on the day itself. It's exactly like, the supposed mythological killing of Osama bin Laden. It's exactly the same. Because there's been no evidence has been given, nothing has been shown to us except an official dialogue that has been given to us by representatives of USA Incorporated. So I think that's the investigation and how it was handled and how the media was handled during the course of Sandy Hook served as an object lesson to the powers that be in presenting information via controlled information sources, and then the ultimate delivery of information into the public sphere. So, my caution is that I believe that there are deliberate blind spots, blind alleys, and deliberately misleading information, misinformation that has been planted and seeded within the public sphere, okay, via all of the pictures and video and leaked material that is available for everybody to pore over when it comes to the Boston Marathon. And I think that largely this is all designed to be traps, to lure people in, to focus on particular areas and say this is a quote-unquote government job, or it's an inside job, or whatever kind of terminology you want to use. And I think that this is designed to entrap certain corners of the, especially the alternative media, but of course it's also designed to keep in line the quote-unquote mainstream media as well, as you could see by the monumental embarrassment of CNN and their handling of this information. So I would caution anybody as to whether to accept the material that you're being presented as evidence, because I believe that in the wake of Sandy Hook, it was decided by whoever it is that's making the calls now that instead of giving no information, we're going to give you so much information, and a lot of it's going to be garbage. So when you see the guy who's supposedly a double amputee being rolled down the street in a wheelchair, you know, with his legs blown off by this bomb, it makes me wonder whether or not this actually happened, whether that picture is real. In other words, and you need to understand what I'm saying here. I'm not saying the event was faked, staged, or anything of that kind. What I'm saying is that the pictures in the video, some of it that is being presented to us via, you know, whatever avenue you want to follow on the internet, may be fake. It's fake video, fake pictures added on to the real story here. And because we don't have a coherent timeline from beginning to end of the entire event, we can't really be sure that what we're being presented with is actually a factual documentation of what happened at that particular scene. And that is ultimately what we need to be very wary of, okay? And that's why I don't want to jump on immediately and say, well, obviously there's all kinds of problems with this right off the bat, even though I could see that at the time. In the previous video that I did talking about the Boston bombing, was cautioning you to not jump off the deep end and make conclusions about this, you understand? So that's basically what I'm trying to tell you, is that we're in a new age and everything is constantly going to change as they gauge public reaction to the material that's presented to them. And because immediately after this happened, so many very loud voices came up and say, false flag, false flag, false flag, I think a lot of the material that was thrown out there was thrown out in an effort to ensnare a lot of people so that they would come up with, you know, flawed so-called solutions to this and make themselves look foolish and possibly eventually bring themselves down as a result of it. So be very careful about what you accept as evidence in this, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's being put out that is suspect, let's put it that way. So in the end, yes, I believe that a faction of USA Incorporated may ultimately be behind what happened in Boston via maneuvering of various people and various events, etc., associated with these two brothers. And intelligence agency involvement with rebels in Chechnya in opposition to Russia, which of course is something that Brzezinski famously hates Russia, and of course he's one of Obama's top advisors. So, you know, anything that's going to go on geopolitically is going to have some ramifications for Russia at some point in time, and this may have been an effort to try to do something along those lines. It may turn around, actually, and it may actually, you know, do the opposite of what was intended if that's the case, and we may actually get some better relations with Russia as a result of what happened in Boston out of this, and that could fly in the face of the people who actually, you know, manipulated and controlled things to bring about the result. So, what does that ultimately mean? I don't know, because I can't identify who these people are. It's going to require a lot more information to know that. And as far as, you know, these brothers having access to things, and it's quite obvious that they had help. And the reason they're downplaying the help angle is because probably it points back to some faction within the government, the intelligence agency, something of this kind. Now, why does it happen now? Well, it serves certain purposes as well, because now we have the social safety net being destroyed in this country. Obama, you know, coming out with his budget to attack Social Security. You know, we have a lot of malaise and lethargy. The economy is slowing down. Jobs are falling off the edge of a cliff. You know, everything is gearing up for an ultimate collapse, and I think everybody sees this coming. So, you know, carefully timed events to be used in such a way. Not that everything's controlled. You know, I think these guys, you know, pretty much did what they were going to do, and they just had little, you know, helping hands along the way. So, in a sense, it's not completely controlled and timed. You know, but when they do happen, you know, they come within a certain sphere of time, and then they're used to distract people from other things that are going on. And the other big thing that came out recently was that the entire premise for austerity around the world, you know, the debt to GDP ratio in that Rogoff study was flawed. And almost every country around the world that is engaged in austerity activities based it on that flawed study. And I think the flawed study was flawed on purpose. I think they knew the error was in there. But because it, you know, bolstered the position that we're going to, you know, basically rob every common person around the world of everything that they have in order to support the ultra-rich and keep the finance capital flowing to keep this decrepit, rusting machine running, that they all turned a blind eye to it. They all knew it was flawed. They used it anyway because it gave some, you know, supposed technical, mathematical support to the idea of austerity. But now it's shown to be wrong, and yet no one's going to fess up to that, and no one's going to say that, oh, hey, maybe we should rethink this, because now they're in whole hog. So it's either that or bust. And so that's only one example of some of the things that are going on that maybe we should be looking at, in addition to being so focused on looking at what may be fake pictures of events associated with Boston in an effort to try and put the blame on some particular person or some particular group, because I don't think you're ultimately ever going to be able to have any answer to that, you know. And certainly, you know, the Islamic radical ideology is something that they can always fall back on whenever they come to lay blame. And in this case, they're trying to paint these guys as being self-radicalized, so they're not even pointing at any particular individual. They're trying to keep this contained. Now, that should be a wake-up call for you right there. The fact that the official narrative is trying to keep this contained. There's really no effort being made to even connect these guys with anything. So that leads me to believe more so that there are other things that are much secret that connect back to factions within the government. And again, the Saudi connection, perhaps. I don't even know if that's true, because I haven't really had time to look into that too much. But the fact that he was detained and then deported immediately afterwards, that tells me they wanted to keep him out of sight. No one to talk to him, no one to see him, etc. You understand? So that just throws a big spotlight on him, as far as I'm concerned. Now, it may be that they discovered that he was here illegally, his visa ran out, and they wanted him gone, you know. I mean, there could be a logical explanation for it, you know, so I don't want to jump to conclusions on that. But that's my feelings as of right now, okay? And I'd urge you all to also remember that there are forces and powers within the matrix that we live in that are equally or more powerful than the so-called government that you've been led to believe is so bad and evil and wrong. And remember that within the government, there are agencies, people, groups, factions, I'm sure, that are there trying to do the best that they can with the resources at their disposal to actually help people, you know, in the country. And I think that you need to have that as a focus. Yes, I'd like to destroy every trace of corruption, corporate involvement, finance capital corrosion of the entire political sphere. And I don't care who is brought down by that, even if it was my own dad, who sadly is no longer alive, but I'm just saying, you know, I don't care where it leads. You know, if the corruption leads to someone that I think is, you know, the greatest person in the history of the world, down he got to go. But there is nobody in politics that I think that way about, so it doesn't really apply to me, but hopefully it would apply to you. So that's basically my take on the Boston bombings. Factions within the government fighting, okay, an extension of Benghazi, you know, an enforcement of pushing more this idea of austerity so that the finance capital machine keeps running. And at the same time, there are these other filaments going out that may bear some fruit for the various factions in power. You know, maybe some agitation against Russia from Chechnya, maybe stirring up some more material in the Middle East, maybe, you know, stoking the fires for war with Syria. You know, there are a lot of things, and that's the idea that Rahm Emanuel was trying to say. Never let a good tragedy go to waste, you see, and that's what they're so good at. So anytime something like this happens, they can draw these lines and use this to further the destructive, murderous USA Incorporated. Okay, rambled about that enough. Now to the movie Oblivion. If you've not seen the movie Oblivion and you want to see the movie Oblivion and you don't want to hear spoilers about the movie Oblivion, then don't listen to the rest of this. Tom Cruise, I was very hesitant to even see this movie because I'm not a big fan of Tom Cruise. I mean, he's done some good movies, but this, because it was, you know, the trailers for it really didn't, you know, tell you anything. I thought it was going to be some kind of Scientology crazy thing, but it actually was a decent science fiction movie. And here's the premise. Again, major spoilers. I'm going to ruin the movie for you. So if you don't want the movie ruined, don't listen to what I'm about to say. Basically what happens is an alien ship comes into the solar system. These, what you're led to believe in the beginning of the movie is these aliens come and they're some kind of creatures that you never see in the movie that are called scavs. And supposedly they came, and as soon as they came into our solar system, they just came right to Earth. They destroyed the moon, and when the moon was destroyed, it was like blown. There's like half a moon and like this ring of debris around the Earth. Is kind of cool to look at. It caused massive shit on the Earth, you know, tidal waves and earthquakes and just unbelievable devastation. And then we were invaded by these scavs, and they basically, you know, overran everything, and we had to use nuclear weapons to kill them, and we won. You know, the human race won. That's the official story as you go into the movie. But in reality, the truth is that what happened is before the aliens arrived, there was a NASA ship sent into space called the Odyssey. And on it was Tom Cruise and several other people, okay? And they were originally going to go to Titan and be the first manned ship to go explore Titan, which is a moon of Saturn. But then they detected this unknown object coming into the solar system, and they were redirected to have a look at that. And it turned out to be this giant sort of upside-down pyramid-shaped ship, which, you know, is full of symbolism in and of itself. There's a triskelion that's associated with it as sort of a symbol, which is also, you know, symbolically important, perhaps. But in any case, what happened is the ship, as it came into the solar system, the NASA craft comes and meets it, no signs of life, whatever. The ship is captured, but not before certain people who were in some kind of hypersleep, whatever, were jettisoned. So the only two people who were captured by the ship were Tom Cruise and his co-pilot, which was a woman. I can't remember the actress's name. And you find this out at the end of the movie. And what they did is that the aliens, whoever they are, which I'm led to believe it's a machine intelligence, okay, they captured Tom Cruise and his co-pilot, and they made like hundreds of thousands of clones of them and turned our own human race against ourselves by making clones of Tom Cruise and the other woman. and then use them as armies to come down to Earth and wipe out the rest of humanity. Well, of course, they didn't succeed. There was, people living underground, and, Tom Cruise didn't know about it. They were fed this line of BS that we won the war, but, we can't live on Earth because it's too dangerous, so we're going to move to Titan. And the only thing they're waiting for is there's these giant, fusion-powered machines that are hovering over the oceans, sucking up seawater and creating energy, and they need that to take the Titan with them and whatever. But actually, in the movie, Tom Cruise is actually working for the aliens the whole time, but he doesn't know it. And there's this underground, resistance of humanity, and they want to destroy the ship because that's the evil, alien ship. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens about, Tom Cruise as like a how many ever generation clone he is. He still has memories, and they do memory wipes on these clones, supposedly for mission security, but actually it's so they forget that they're humans and they've been duped by this alien machine thing. But as you would expect, through the course of events, some of his original memories start to come back, and then he meets the real people, and other events happen. I'm not going to describe the whole movie, but basically, I think it was a good movie for one very major reason. One of the things that was so used by this alien intelligence, this machine intelligence that came to destroy the Earth, were drones. Yes, drones. They went over the entire surface of the Earth, being controlled by this giant machine in space. And they were sent to hunt down any human they could find. Okay, they were designed to kill. And the thing that's so great about this is because it portrays drones as evil, as destructive, as human-killing machines. And I think that is great, that it's being portrayed on the big screen like this, because we do not need drones. After Boston bombing, people saying, even Rand Paul, for all you libertarian lovers of Rand Paul, is calling for drones to be used, in our domestic skies. There you go. Go kiss Rand Paul's buttocks. Okay. I love this movie because it portrays drones as bad, as evil, as destructive forces. Implacable machine intelligence that just does what it does, and that is kill. So, I think drones are awful, horrible machines of destruction. So, this movie is absolutely great for that purpose, if nothing else. And I think it gives a very positive message about humanity. And that is that we have certain characteristics that make us people. And amongst them is compassion and empathy and caring about one another. And I think there's a lot more in our society who have been led to believe that we need to be more, focused on ourselves and selfish because there's only so much for us to get. Screw the other guy. I'm going to get what I can and line my pockets. That's what's running this entire finance capital machine that we live in. You see? And there's a lot of people who say, yeah, well, those people who are just relying on Social Security, well, they should have taken more care of their investments over time, and they wouldn't have to rely on the government. Well, you know what? We've been screwed every step of the way. And you're not really doing anything by pointing out the flaws of somebody else who may not have had money to invest, who may not have had anything to do something for their future. What are you doing? All you're doing when you say, screw those people who are not going to get their Social Security benefits, screw those people who are not going to get their Medicare, screw those people who are not going to get their food stamps. All you're doing is you're pushing somebody's head down further into the mud. And what purpose does that serve? Why can't we all recognize that we need to have compassion and empathy for one another? Before we decide to start naming names and start, calling people bums and worthless and telling people to go get a job. Yeah, go get a job. Yeah, well, that's about the most useless thing you can tell anybody today. And talking about how, oh yeah, it's useless bums who want to just, suck on the system or whatever. Why not support the fact that they have a right to all of those things because they've paid into it all of their working lives? And you know, you're stomping on these people and praising the fact that something's happened along these lines because of the so-called useless eaters on the bottom only serves to dehumanize humanity. And in the end, all you're doing is making the richest people richer. You're not going to get anything out of it. So I thought the movie was good. Oblivion, good movie. Paints drones as evil, bad, destructive machines. And also has very strong, good things to say about being human, about compassion, about empathy, which are all things that we need to have a lot more of. So that's my incredibly long story for today. Thank you. Good night.